motion reads, this House believes that students should be banned from political involvement. On my left is the government bench, which will be speaking for the motion. Sorry, it's the other way around. Yeah, on my right is the government bench, who will be speaking for the motion, means they'll tell you why they think students should not be involved in political involvement. And on my left is the opposition, which means they'll tell you why students should be involved in politics. So without further ado, I'd like to invite the Prime Minister of Government, Mr. Razak, to present the case and stand in his name. Here. Seven years.
It locks students in a cocoon of opinions. It shackles them to a specific set of values. It insidiously compromises the ability of a person to experience the full educational experience. It is politics. Opening government would tell you that we as an opposition are against political movements. We're against the ability of a student to join and be involved in politics. What is our definition of political involvement? One, when you're running for office, that means you cannot in our world. When you're trying to specifically align yourself with a particular political movement, you cannot in our world. What you can do, for example, is join rallies, but specifically rallies which aren't centered around certain political ideals. In other words, things like per se, which happened recently, that is fine in our world because it doesn't mean you align yourself to a particular value or particular political party. Secondly, you're still allowed to vote, and you're still allowed to express yourself independently, your opinions. What we are centrally banning here is the ability for a person to choose a political party and then conform that political party. Secondly, this debate is a value judgment. It means to assess whether or not it is legitimate for a student to then join political movements. But it's not necessarily a debate about what are the effects of what happens when we ban this and whether or not this is actually feasible in the real world. Rather, we would say, if we can imagine a perfect world where we can ban students such that there will be no reactions which would lead to specific harms, should we do it and why should we do so? And in doing that, we can do that in a few ways. One, we will disallow them to join or align themselves to a particular party. But secondly, as an alternative, what they can do instead is join student unions, so become political representatives of their individual bubbles within those universities. Secondly, they can still join interest movements, specific ideals. This can be whatever they feel is necessary to them, LGBT, religious movements, whatever necessary. What am I going to talk about today? I'm going to talk about one thing. What is the responsibility of a student in a context of university education, and what are the harms that political parties and political involvement brings to those? Before that, any POs?
If you're not okay with students forming their own being elected, well, are you okay with people, representatives from the labour unions being elected?
Yes, if they are not in university, they are fine, they can join. That is not the debate. One, responsibility of a student. Let's first think about joining a university. When you join university, you make an informed choice to partake in a journey of intellectual fulfillment. What that means is exploring the maximal range of ideas and opinions, because universities exist to facilitate your ability to think independently. Why is that the case? Two reasons. One, universities exist not only to teach you a particular subject or a particular skill set. It teaches you to be a holistic individual. That's why in America, for example, you have liberal arts education. You are encouraged in the UK to take an outside option, a language, an extra thing, something to break you out of just one specific subject. And the reason you do that, the reason why you have academic advisors constantly coaching you about CVs and soft skills, is because it's about creating that holistic individual. No, thank you. Secondly, it's also about intellectual openness. The ability to learn something is predicated upon you being open to different ideas. And at university, that can only be maximized when you're open to different ideas and discussions, be it philosophy or the philosophy of science. Given that characteristic of university, why are political parties pernicious this ideal? Three reasons. One, they have mandatory opinions. In other words, when you subscribe yourself to a political party, you have to agree with certain ideas. That can be, no thank you, affirmative action. That can be an opposition to like NHS. And in most cases, that means you have to choose and you have to agree with one particular idea, that stops you from exploring other ideas. The moment by which you're mandated by a political party to agree in one way, to never participate in another discussion, that becomes a problem for you. Secondly, it's very dogmatic. When you're part of a political party, political movement, you tend to make that your circle of friends. You go to political rallies specific to that political party. You listen to the same thing again and again. Even if you're a person who's open to a different idea, you get conditioned to believe in certain principles. You stay in that cocoon of opinions, and that means you don't get to explore other alternatives. At least on a comparison, that means you cannot do so as well as in our world. But lastly, you have to take positions. If you run for office, you have to make certain specific manifestos. You have to also align yourself to a political party. That leaves very little room for you to actually change your opinions. All those means that political parties inherently stop you from exploring other ideas, other principles that might be necessary for your character development. Why is it then important? No, thank you. It's important for you to develop as a person because university students end up running for politics. The reality of this world is that there are very few individuals who get to run for, say, politics without proper education, because that's just how the world works in terms of perception and how you bring yourself in this world. Given that, these individuals are undeniably going to, some of these individuals are undeniably going to be the leaders of tomorrow. How do you best have individuals who are open to different ideas? Because we think the problem with politics now is the fact that people tend to be very dogmatic. They stay in a certain view, they believe in their view, and they refuse to change. That refusal is a result of being involved at a very early age. You don't get to set yourself in a bubble where you can discuss, be open. Our side encourages that openness that will lead to more individuals being open when they join politics. Why is this important? It's important because society changes. There was a time when individuals thought the Earth was the center of the universe. That time took a really long time for that perception to then be removed. And the reason in most cases why that's the case is because people buy into different values. People believe in things and they stop that way. Mahira Black, for example, was a very important politician that stood for the SNP and ran for politics and won. Yes, but that particular individual would have been better off exploring other opinions first instead of then aligning herself now with the Scottish National Independence Movement. The person can no longer, at this point, explore other avenues because he's cocooned in a way and now cannot explore the other options that might be better in the future. What we stand for in government side is very simple. When you're a future leader, and that will be the case when you join universities, you have a responsibility to yourself. That responsibility also transitions and transitive. That means it's to your other individuals as well, once you run for office. Given that responsibility, you cannot afford to only think in one way. You cannot afford to believe that one particular view is your worldview. We are very proud to propose.
Thank you, Prime Minister. Now I'd like to invite the Leader of Opposition to present the case for opposition. Here.
Madam Speaker, members of the floor, it's a big shame that SART government is a side that believes that you, as a student, contractually sell your soul solely to academic purposes, solely to not, abiding by all this dichotomy of politics, not joining any particular interest that you believe in, not fighting for what you want to fight for. If that was what Bernie Sanders would have stood for, he wouldn't be rallying with Martin Luther King. He wouldn't have run for mayor in the early 80s if that was his main problem. But moving on with the rebuttal session from side government for today, let's talk through what they have to go through. Firstly, they've been talking about this whole idea about if you join politics in campus, if you join certain rallies of certain organizations, if you run for a certain office, then you're going to get like this dichotomic mess. Dogmatic mess. You're going to have people trying to squabble over opinions. You're going to have bubbles of thought about similar views, whether it's Republican, conservative, liberal, or Democrat. But the problem is, they haven't explained in any manner of their speech that how once you remove this avenue for students to be elected into certain positions, how is it that suddenly students are going to be open to other political opinions? It's like saying that had Mary Blacklock been given the chance of running for an MP for Scotland, suddenly she would have been open to joining the Tories. She would have been open to joining the Labour. She would have been open to adopting the austerity measures just because she wasn't elected as a member of parliament. That's absurd, and we cannot accept that. And lastly, about the idea of responsibility on how involvement in politics and holding these positions are about partaking a journey of political opinions. Then we have two responses to that. Number one, if commitments are a problem, why do we even bother these students joining other co-curricular activities, whether it's debate, whether it's cultural activities, but we give them a right of association to do so if they believe that's what they should do in their study terms, apart from reading, apart from facing textbooks, apart from all the academic nightmare you have to go through as a student. But before that, I'll take from the Prime Minister.
On a comparison, are you more likely to accept contradicting values when you are not forced to subscribe to a particular set of opinions when you join a political party? Please engage in a comparative.
Okay, let's put it this way. They told us that without joining a political party, I won't have this sense of dogmaticness. We have to take into the consideration that whatever opinion a person has is not only dependent on the university or the setting of the university that he or she goes to, not just the avenues that exist for him or her to go to, but also as a collective experience from his childhood, and only the university part is a climax of it. And that is how we view that in our case, at least we provide them with an avenue to fight for what they believe in, none taken later. Then secondly, about the issue of commitments. If commitments are really an issue, then how about CEOs? Why don't we pin CEOs for siding with for making such tough decisions when the stakes from within the CEOs are higher than compared to the students? Would you rather have a student fail, or would you rather have a CEO bringing down his entire firm tumbling down the block? But before I go on with the affirmative from our side, yes.
Yes. We didn't say commitments are a problem. The question was, would you align yourself to a political party in which you have to adhere to their values? Each political party comes with a set of ideas that they are willing to put through because they are an organization. Commitments are fine, but would you say commitments that have to change your views are okay?
Understood, but let's even look at the news from back home. There's limited avenues for students trying to gather behind the opposition parties and organizations, but they do so among their close friends. Eventually, they have talks in coffee shops, they have informal sessions. This shows that even without an avenue for them to go with the opposition, they do so anyway in a more informal manner. Going to our side, firstly, let's look at the status quo about the adolescents involved. These are individuals who are passionate about communal rights, whether it's studying on the 1MDB issue, or whether it was Bernard Sanders against the Vietnam War and desegregation, or whether it's Jeremy Corbyn. What these individuals have in common is that they are the ones who are trying to communicate to the establishment about what's wrong in their society, and we think that they have a positive impact on the society. But let's move on with our first contention about the right, under the notion of the rights of association. For example, under status quo, we have workers in factories who are joining unions so that they can bring their employers to the negotiating table to enforce a better minimum wage. Likewise, we see that student political involvement is important because what the political establishment decides at the end of the day is going to impact them one way or another. Let's look at the recent strikes in certain countries like Slovenia, in certain countries like Norway, where they protest against the increase of tuition fees, and therefore, because of their involvement in politics, because they have certain members of parliament who are trying to be their voice, they can have their voice heard. They can sustain a system of affordable tertiary education. And what's more important is the question, why running for office? Well, it's because protests don't get the amount of action that they deserve. Sometimes they do, but what is more important is to have one of these individuals be represented in a parliament, in a legislature, in any organization that can get things going. That is why we need another Mario Black, we need another Bernie Sanders, and that is why we need these individuals. Now, secondly, on the idea that even that they have a right of association in terms as a right of in terms of how they act as a voice, as a platform of representation. That is why I've asked the Prime Minister, why do we allow the laborers and the workers to be represented, but not the students? Whereas they have these pockets of voters, have their individual issues of their own, and we cannot let one segment of society overshadow the other, and with that we take this debate. Thank you.
Thank you, Leader of Opposition. Before we move on to the next speaker, there's two things I'd like to clarify. I'm not texting, I'm making notes. Secondly, last time I checked, I'm a Mr. Speaker, not a Madam Speaker, so it'd be nice to be referred to as a Madam Speaker. Without further ado, I'd like to invite the Deputy Prime Minister, Andrew, here.
Very good evening, ladies and gentlemen. The motion table today is this House believes that students should be banned from political involvement. Before I move on to my case, which consists of two ideas that I'll talk about later, I'd like to rebut a few things brought forward by the opposition leader. First, he talked about commitments are not a problem, where students can still commit to something, and what's wrong if they can't commit to something at this age, what's going to happen to them in the future. Well, our response to that is really simple. It's okay to have commitment. What is not okay is to have your values and your beliefs change just because someone you associate yourself with have different sets of values from you. Why do we not accept that? It's simply because we think that this is an unhealthy growth process for our leaders of the future. We agree these students are going to be leaders in the future. Would you really want them to align themselves to a specific organization where they're not allowed to think or voice out their opinions, which might be different from what the party proposes? And secondly, he talked about the status quo and how you can still, the need for students to voice out their opinions and the right of association. Our response to both of these arguments and the third one as well, why workers but not student union, but not students, is simple. You have the right to vote. That is your right to a voice. You can vote to put the political party that you agree with in charge. That is every person's right. And that's okay. And second, you are still able to voice out opinions. We never said no to voicing out your opinions. All we said is, do not align yourself. We do not allow you to align yourself to one particular political party. Why would you do that? Yes, ma'am, go on.
Assuming that bias, knowing that bias and dogma comes from a lot of things, conditioned from growth and environment and things like that, don't you think it's better for the students to be talking about it and being open to criticism and being shut in a box and always believing that dogma their whole life?
Yes, exactly. Talk about it with your friends. Go ahead, discuss, have an intellectual discussion, consider the right and the wrong. The thing is, when you are in a political party, this does not happen. If the values are set in such, it doesn't matter if you think they're right or wrong, you have to follow them. That's the whole argument. That's my argument later on, which I'll present. And secondly, the opposition leader talked about why do we allow workers and laborers to have unions but not students. My response to this is, yes, we do allow students to have unions. In university, there are student unions. Take part. And you can take part in any non-governmental organization. Anything that does not have a specific set of values that you have to adhere to, a specific set of ideas that you have to follow. We encourage you, go join. What we don't like is when you, as a student, as a young leader, a potential leader of tomorrow, at 20-something years old, align yourself to one particular party that has its policies, and you do not allow yourself to think. No, ma'am, sit down, thank you. Okay, now moving on to my arguments. Okay, I'm going to talk about two ideas here, guys. First, the idea of political parties themselves. No matter which political party you talk about, there is always a good and a bad. Each political party comes with its own advantages and disadvantages. It's the nature of politics. You have the right and the left. And having said that, if you were to adhere yourself to a specific political party, do you think you'll still be able to have intellectual discourse, being able to discuss the right and the wrong of each party? Do you see leaders of, do you see I quote the Malaysian political scene. Do you see people of UMNO admitting the flaws that UMNO has? Do you see the people of MCA, MIC, whatever? Do you see them admitting that the flaws that each party has? No, they don't. One, because they're not allowed to in public, because that would show weakness to the party. In comparison, if this person was an independent individual, he would be able to discuss these things freely. I quote, for example, Syed Saddiq joining the new political party. Assuming he was not in this political party, he would be able to voice out the flaws on this political party, on this party that he's joining. But because he has aligned himself to this party, every opinion that he has to be in one way or another aligned to the leaders that he responds to, which is what exactly we don't want to happen. He is an extremely talented individual. Why should he align himself to these people and only discuss and not consider the flaws that this particular party might have? The second idea is the whole, let's look at the status quo. When you talk about students joining politics, what are the kind of students that will join politics? Students that are most likely in university holding positions. They are natural leaders in their circle of friends. These are the people that have the highest chance of joining politics in the future. Having said that, if you consider both of these ideas, what we feel is that it's actually very, very detrimental to a student society if you talk about it in university. Because these students who are already leaders among their groups of friends are now aligned to specific parties with specific ideas and policies and values that their friends might not agree with. And they can't do anything about it because they have openly declared their subscription to these ideas. And with someone who has openly accepted that, yes, I'm going to follow this party and I'm going to agree to whatever that they have to say, do you think it is a healthy, growing environment for the students when you have, let's just say, one person is siding the left and another person is siding the right? Do you think they'll be able to discuss? Yes, they might be able to discuss within themselves, which is not the point here, but would they be able to come out with an opinion to say that, yes, I agree, my party has its flaws, but we're going to fight for it anyway? No, because logically that doesn't work. It's not how political parties work. Whether you agree or not, you fight for them. Yes, ma'am, go on.
So between somebody who's like considered 10 years of his life makes his living out of a party and someone who's just started into a party, which one do you think has more of a likelihood to voice out against the party? Their own party.
Oh yes, if that's the case, then the one who has just joined the party is most likely to voice out. Okay, fair point. But then again, the question remains, is he allowed? How many people are actually voicing out against their party right now? That's the question. Yes, it's an idealistic world. If you want to talk about a perfect world, we can go on, where everything's nice and flowery. But in reality, it does not happen. The moment you align yourself to a political party, your voice is lost. You can't voice out against them because you've already aligned your interests with them. And that is why we from the government believe that students should be banned from political movements, simply because as leaders of tomorrow, we feel it's an unhealthy growth process for them. Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy Prime Minister. Now to move on with the extension of the case from the opposition, I'd like to invite the Deputy Leader of Opposition. Here.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen. So, my name is Muaz and I'm the second speaker of today, and we strongly oppose the motion that's in front of us. Now, onto the rebuttals. Truth is, they make it sound as if politics is such a horrible thing, and that when we join a particular party, we are confined to that, and we are not allowed to think for ourselves. They make it sound so that students are stupid creatures that follow anything that would be told to them, when the fact is, if a student joins a party, then they must have done the research. They are completely ignoring the fact that students can actually think for themselves. Their whole argument is based on the student is an immature being that is not capable of thinking for themselves before joining a political party, which is that really the case? If we are talking about maturity, ladies and gentlemen, there are plenty of immature adults out there, and there are plenty of mature students. And for you to completely disregard the thinking process of students themselves is absolutely against the human rights or the students' rights themselves to voice out over their opinions. I will go over the first point, which I'll be making today, which is politics affects the student teachers. The picture they are painting is a horrible picture of politics, when politics is the study or practice of distribution of power or resources within a given community, as well as the interrelationship between communities. Now, are we not, as students, part of the community? We are. Recent demographic studies show that ages from 0 until 25 make up almost 40% of our country back home. Now, this is a huge number. Of course, there are other channels to voice out our opinions. Of course, there there are protests and stuff like that. But the truth is, when you join a political platform, that's the most effective way of you wanting to make a change. Now, there are huge gaps between people in power, and the truth is, political involvement among students is failing. I'll give you a quote by KJ, young people aged 18 to 30 now make up 25% of the world's population of 1.8 billion, the highest ever recorded. By this sheer volume, it is the young people that dictate the economy, the markets, and the trend. You have distrust in the political system. You feel that politics cannot change anything, and you've seen it all, you've heard it all. Nothing really changes. That's why you have to be interested and join politics. This is said by KJ, by Khalid Jamaluddin. Now,
Points of.
yeah, sure.
If you want to talk about the action of students and so on, the main point should be the voters right now. Yes, they make up the highest number of 1.8 billion, you just said. But how many 18 to 35 years old are actually coming out to vote? The voter turnout is so low. If you want to be heard, the most basic thing that you should be doing is voting instead of aligning yourself to a party.
Oh, you say that as if you can't align to yourself to a party and vote as well. Because, ladies and gentlemen, if you look at the radical changes in the world right now, Donald Trump and Brexit, if you look at the young voters, they voted for mostly Bernie Sanders in the preliminary rounds, they voted for Hillary Clinton. It is the older people, the older generation that voted for the radical views of Donald Trump, the radical views of Brexit. So the truth is, it affects the students' lives more than it will affect the people out there, because the students will be living in a time where all these rules, all these bills that are being talked about in Parliament will directly affect the students. It will affect them when they graduate. The housing fees, the loan fees, study fees, everything, it will affect the students, and by shutting out the voice of students just because they want to join a party and they want their opinions and their voices to be heard is absolutely ridiculous. On to my second point, it prepares the students. Why should the students join political parties or have an opinion? It's because it improves them and it prepares them for the future. The whole point of going to a university is to prepare for the future. And it's very ironic for them to ban the students from joining political arenas because it does prepare them for the future. How? Well, when you are part of politics, when you are part of a political society, you do have to speak, and you will increase your social skills, your speaking skills, your confidence, your teamwork, your leadership. You gain all this, and by the government hindering the students from learning from these experiences, you are by proxy, you are harming them by not reaching their full potential. The truth is, because they join politics, they are more experienced, they know what's going on at the ground level, and they know exactly what's being done in the political parties. So by them joining, they will have a clearer understanding of politics. And you say, by aligning yourself to a political party, you cannot change your opinions. Well, we all know there are many people out there who've joined one party and then changed the next party, changed to another party. You want a famous example? Just look at Tulma Ali right now. Right, so the truth is, if we look at leaders like Anwar Ibrahim, Rafida Aziz, Ibrahim Ali, they were all great student leaders at their time, and they were all involved in politics. And when they graduated, companies were looking out for them because they knew of their talents, they knew they could speak, they knew they were confident, they knew of their leadership skills. So in return, by joining politics, you are preparing yourself for the future. And not only that, you are preparing the country for the future, because you will have a set of young generations that are prepared, that are well skilled, and these people will be the leaders of the country. I'm not taking a video, sorry. So, I'd like to end by just saying that the truth is, it's sad that the government thinks so low of the students. It's sad that they think the students cannot form an opinion for themselves before joining a political party. It's really sad, and I hope the points given by the opposition today shows that government and shows that the audience and Mr. Speaker, it's a moral crime to ban students from joining the political arena. Thank you very much.
Hear, hear. Can you wait a bit? Moving on to the final speakers of both sides, I would like to invite David as the government whip. Hear, hear.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'll be dealing with two issues in the debate today as the whip. Firstly, I'll deal with this idea of what exactly is the responsibility of the student individually. And secondly, we'll look at the student body as a collective and what exactly is best for the student body moving forward. We see a lot of characterization coming from leader of opposition, talking about this right of association and how commitments is an important thing. We think that they miss the debate in certain respect, because we think that the idea behind what my Prime Minister was talking about is about the need for neutrality, right? The need for a safe space within a university for individuals to voice out their view and to form a collective, form an individual opinion over the differing political views that are outside, the differing public policy choices that political party makes. We think that that's important, especially within the context of a university, because this is a place where individuals are starting to learn about themselves, learn about the world, learn about the political ideologies that are in place, and learn about the need for them to have their own individual stance on a particular point or a particular argument. We think that this lacks in authority if they are forced to join a political party and join within that political ideology. Because what exactly is a political party, right? It's where there's an external central body within a hierarchical structure that issues directives or issues certain messages, certain party directions that you need to follow. We think that is extremely crucial in this debate. Why? Because that is in essence the differing method between that and a debating society or a mathematics society at the end of the day. Because if this party, for instance, Jeremy Corbyn can, issue a directive and say all parties within the university needs to adhere to this particular view, we think that is the differing sort of understanding when you talk about neutrality, when you talk about an individual being able to form their own opinion, and all these arguments about diversity and holistic views at the end of the day. We think that they sort of miss the debate in this respect, because we think that speaker skills and things like that, all of this can be developed in other areas. It's not mutually exclusive to joining a political party anyway. So we don't think that there's a necessity in that sense to join political parties. But based on all of the harms that we have already identified and told you about, we think that it's extremely crucial in this respect for them not to be able to join political parties where there's an external force that sort of drive the discussion within universities, that sort of drive the debate, and we think that is problematic in its most purest sense. But go ahead.
Yeah. Come on, this need for neutrality, forced to join. It seems like you haven't listened to anything that I said. I said students can think and they're not forced to join, and need for neutrality until when? So, okay, as long until they graduate, okay, they cannot join, right? But after they graduate, you're saying that they can join. You might as well just join if they already have the opinions. You say that as if students cannot form an opinion.
Your whole argument about neutrality only happens to the point that they join the political party. So you're neutral to the point that you join the political party, but after that you're forced to subscribe to the sorts of values that your political party has already introduced in the first place. That is the difference that side government want to deal with. But secondly, let's look about this whole idea about the student body. What exactly is best for this student body moving forward? They brought an argument about the new blood debate, right? Where these new individuals are able to voice out against the tyranny of the tyranny of big leadership, the tyranny of official authority. We think that firstly that is rare because there's always the threat of being kicked out of your own political party in the first place. So these individuals will not be able to voice out. Plus, secondly, if you're a new individual within that political party, chances are you do not have the influence to change the sort of party political structure or the constitution of the party in the first place. So we don't think that necessarily fits into the kind of characterization we want to talk about. But secondly, if you're talking about apathy, right, you're talking about the fact individuals are not voting and do not know about the current political issues that are up for debate. We think that the fact that you factionalize individuals and make them and force them to choose sides is even more detrimental to the political discussion. Why? Because the fact that you factionalize the student body, right, means that individuals now are forced to adhere to their party values and what exactly their party asks them to subscribe to. What this means is that they are unable to formulate policies that advance the student body as a whole and formulate messages that are able to bring forward the student body. Why? Because firstly, these individuals are not answerable to the student body in itself any longer. They're forced to adhere to this sort of party political structure that we talk about and the leaders within the political party. But secondly, they are forced to adhere to the party's highly sensitive or political issues and the direction of the party was willing to take in the first place. We think that this is problematic within the formulation of political discussion that we want to talk about. But before I go ahead.
Assuming that someone speaking out against the party could be the thing that steers the party in a different direction, who do you think is the most likely person to speak out? Someone who's been involved in politics his whole life, makes a living out of it, or a student who's just new and has nothing to lose?
But the problem is, if you want to steer the political direction or steer the political conversation, right, chances are you need to have that influence to begin with. Chances are you need to garner the support and lobby groups and interest groups to be able to change our past policies in the first place. If you're talking about a group of individuals who are not willing to, a group of official authorities of the party who are not willing to change and not willing to adhere to the sorts of differing ideology, we don't understand how new blood can suddenly change the debate and can suddenly change all of these issues that you have identified already, right? Because chances are, if these individuals are the new blood that needs to sort of like stir the pot a little bit, chances are that the official authority are not, doing a very good job. And why would they want to listen to, one member of the political party when they can just threaten to evict you if you do not, follow their particular ideology, right? So at the end of the day, what exactly did we tell you coming from side government? We think that from the perspective of a student, there is an importance and there is a weight given to the sort of neutrality and collective holistic development that we want to see happen for the particular student. But secondly, as a student body as a whole, we think that it's extremely important for them to be neutral, to be able to push forward certain party policies that maintain the integrity of the student body in itself. And for that, I'm very proud to propose. Thank you.
Here, Thank you, Government Whip. Now to conclude the substantive speeches, I would like to invite the opposition with Ilmira Modi. Here.
Side government is a side that doesn't really believe in the youth. They say new blood cannot change parties, they say new blood can't think, and we don't want to think that. We think that new blood and youth are the people to change new parties, that they can opt out of a party even though they aligned for it like 4 years ago. If I'm 20 and I decide that, hey, I don't believe in this type of this anymore, I think that anyone can easily just jump ship if they want to, right? But let's think about the issues I'm going to talk about today. There are three. Firstly, I'll be talking to you about dogma and discourse, and whether or not they should start from the student level. Okay. Secondly is why students need to be involved in the political sphere and why this discourse needs to involve them being part of the parties and running and everything. And thirdly, my last issue would be why it's important for the nation, for these students, to be involved in political process. And this is something that's talked about in substance speakers, which side government has very conveniently ignored. But before that, let's just tackle some very, very surface rebuttals, right? So the crux of side government is that I'm not allowed to an alternative opinion once I align myself to the party. And we don't think so. We've given you examples of politicians who have realigned, like Mahathir. I might write him words up no, and now he's like head of opposition, right? We think that it's perfectly able for me to change my opinions, to start a new view, to go to a new party, and we don't know why I am forced to stick to one opinion that I had a few years ago and for the rest of my life. In fact, we're even bringing to you from side opposition that they are the people who are more likely to jump ship because they have less to lose, because they haven't invested their whole lives, they're not making money out of politics, so they can move to a different party and change a new thing, they can say what they want to say without being threatened by much, right? So that's false. Secondly, the second one will tell you that the responsibility of a student is to study, to be a good student, and to keep your mind open and all that, right? But we think that does not exclude you from your responsibility as a citizen, and doesn't allow for the government to throw away your rights to say, to associate, and to participate in a democracy. Because we think that a democracy should be accessible to everybody and anybody and at any point of time, not just when you're in a ballot box, but at any point of time in your life that you think that, hey, I want to be involved, I should be able to make a change. And we think that the best way to make a change isn't to protest, isn't to rally, but to be in the discussion, to be in that office, to be at that table where they're making the policies, right? And we are the only side that champions for that. But then let's talk about neutrality, right? We think that neutrality does not disappear once you join a party, right? We think that there are times when I can be an individual person and I can detach myself from the party that I am in and say, hey, I don't actually agree to that, right? Whether or not there's a change is a different story. But the truth is, I am allowed to my own personal opinion. In fact, this is the time when you hear things like a new wave in UMNO, when you hear things like Khairy Jamaluddin bringing up proposals that you don't normally hear from in UMNO meetings, right? This is the time when students are allowed to bring change, and neutrality is existing more than ever. So we think that with increased number of youth being involved in this politics, neutrality will exist even more. Before I move on to my issues,
who are best positioned to shape the dogmatic roots of a party? A student with no qualification and be called a wimp by older political officials, or a person with credibility with an education and a support group that they have garnered throughout the years in university?
I think anyone can have the influence, right? Anyone with the right rationality, anyone who's brave enough to talk it out, people will start to listen to you, right? People are listening to Syed Saddiq, and even before he got a degree, guys. Like, the thing is, you don't need to have a degree and qualification and be extra smart for you to make an impact. You just have to say something. And you don't need to be old for people to respect you. We think anyone can make that impact if they're brave enough to do it, and we think students are the people to do this in the first place. So let's move on to my issues. I'm running out of time. First, dogma and discourse, right? Government wants us to believe that politics closes the political view of students. And when the moment I join a political party, I am biased, dogmatic, and I don't have any other opinion except the ones that someone from somebody tells me to have, right? We don't think so. We think that bias and dogma exist even before you join a political party. I hear it from my parents, they vote for a certain party, I think this party is correct, and therefore that's what I am conditioned to believe in. I think the only way the students actually truly step out of this dogma is if they're properly involved in the political process, in political discourse, and actually invited and feel welcome to say things and be criticized, be open to criticism, and be open to share their own opinions. And this can only happen when students feel welcome in the political sphere. And the only way we can make students feel welcome in the political sphere is not to ban them from joining discussions, is not to ban them from joining the democracy, from joining parties, is to welcome them in and let them voice out their opinions and have discourse. This is when students can have discourse freely when they feel like they are involved. No, Andrew, no more. Okay? But more than that, we feel like students are the people to change it. We see voices like Syed Saddiq, like making letters to Prime Minister, things that have never been done in the history of Malaysia, right? We think that in comparison to somebody who's invested his whole life, makes a living out of politics, students, these people who have nothing to lose, these are the people who can change, these are the people who can bring discourse, and these are the people who speak out anyway, right? But let's move on to my second issue. Why does this have to happen with them in political parties? Why can't they just have rallies? Why can't they just be bystanders, right? Because there's a difference. We think that you get involved in a bigger spectrum of discussion when you are inside political parties. When you are inside a table listening to what actually goes on behind the scenes, you get a bigger spectrum and you get a bigger, yeah, you get it, right? Okay. But also, we think that when you are no longer a bystander of politics, when you're no longer looking into the window and trying to decide, see what actually happens, you feel like you're involved in the process and you're more likely to affect change and more likely to say things, right? But my last issue is this: why is it important for the nation to allow students to talk, right? Because we say that a lot of people talk about issues a whole lot, but real change only happens when policies are made. Real change only happens within these closed doors, and we need students to be able to be involved in these processes. We need students to be able to steer political conversation, to steer political direction, for ways that will benefit other students. And this is when real change happens, when students are directly involved in politics. At the end of the day, we think that democracy should be something that is applicable to anyone, accessible at any time, in any way. And we don't think that students, just by value of being students, should be excluded from that because for some reason I can't think. Because we believe in them and we believe in people like you. Thank you.
Thank you, Opposition Whip. Before we do the reply speech session, we're going to have a 5-minute break because Andrew needs to proceed. I'm kidding, you always do that before the reply speech session. We always have a 5-minute break. Right, so now we are back to the reply speech session. The reply speeches will be 4 minutes long, and it will be started by the opposition team. Without further ado, I'd like to invite Muaz to start the reply speech from the opposition.
Ladies and gentlemen, we good debate. Start straight away. Right, so the government has defined the motion as banning students from running for office, aligning with parties, and that by definition they will be confined to a certain part. It hinders their character, growth, and the responsibility of a student is of an intellectual journey, not a political one. And they've also talked about that each party comes with positive and negatives. However, but by joining them, you are constrained to a certain part, and you cannot think for yourselves. And you join, and by joining, you are forced upon opinions and opinions and opinions, and you cannot think. And as well as that, they have said that the kinds to join these political parties are natural leaders, and because they are natural leaders, by joining their parties, it becomes detrimental to society because they have to follow a set of rules. Now, what we said, and what we explicitly said, that we can form different opinions even after joining parties, because there are tons of examples out there of people who did join parties and then, well, they changed parties. We have said that we aren't forced to join in the first place, because their perception of aligning to a party is that we are forced to join. However, we are not forced to join. There isn't someone with a gun onto our head telling us to join that party. We are allowed to speak for ourselves. We do believe in the youth, and we are the ones that are being affected. Whatever that's being discussed in Parliament, whatever bill that is being passed, in turn, it will affect us students more than it will affect those people up there. So we have a moral obligation to voice out our opinion, and by the government not giving us that chance, not giving us that opportunity, we are ignoring the opinions and the views of a majority of the society, which is absolutely ridiculous. Now, according to their logic, which is, I think, the main point of the debate is that when we join political society, we cannot think for ourselves, and basically we are caged within that society, within that political society, forever until we die. But the main point is, we are not caged within that opinion. We can make opinion for ourselves, and we in turn build ourselves for the future, because we are more exposed to these ideas, we are more exposed to these political discussions, political discourses, and you gain social skills and soft skills that, well, you can gain from other places, but if you can gain from here, then why not, right? And by improving ourselves, we are improving the future generations, we're better prepared for the future, and in turn, the political arena will be cleaner, and hopefully we will be able to move in a better direction for the nation as a whole. I think that's it for my reply speech. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen.
To conclude today's debate and henceforth end this session, I would like to invite the Prime Minister with the reply speech. Here.
It took Bangladesh decades to jump ship from the Barisan National to what is the new political party, Bersatu. It took Anwar Ibrahim jail time and getting kicked out of what was a really high position of power in order to form what is currently the opposition movement. The fact is, a lot of people choose to jump ship, not because they have changed opinions. It is because they cannot gain anything else from being in that political party. And that is a fact that the examples opposition used are inherently non-comparative to the students you wanted to talk about. Because these, bear in mind, were people in positions of power, and even they could not change by themselves just by a change in opinion. What did we tell you instead? We told you, in order to change the group and the dogmatic structure that is political parties, you have to start from the bottom. And we agree this takes time. That is why, in our issue on discourse, we told you that, look, there are very many structural reasons as to why students cannot change their opinions, or at least to a large extent on a comparative, is it more impossible for you to change your opinions when they align themselves with political movements. We gave you 3 structural reasons. Those reasons were mandatory opinions, those reasons were things like dogmatic bubble, but what did they tell you in response? They told you that, oh look, students are actually mature, they're adults, and that dogma comes from many things, not just your party, it comes from your parents, it comes from your friends. That is all true. But when you're in a political party, you have to subscribe to them. You have to look like you're part of the game. You have to also tell them that, look, I'm supporting your policies. Why would a political party accept someone who is fundamentally against their core principles? That makes no sense. In other cases, we would say that there is a spectrum. Specifically, she told us, look, the only way you can change students is if you join political parties and hence you get exposed to a wide range of options and discussions. That is weird. Like, fundamentally, if you join a political party, if anything, you narrow the spectrum of things you can discuss because it becomes about how we implement this policy. Look, political parties isn't just a bastion of discussion. A lot of times it's about getting elected. And getting elected doesn't only mean discussing issues. It means how do you win these votes? How do you sacrifice certain voters? And in these cases, you still discuss the same issues you want to impose when you pass for a manifesto. However, our alternatives were interest groups, were rallies, for like very subjective ideals that don't align yourself to a particular political party. Things like democracy, i.e. Bersih, or things like even certain interest groups like LGBT or religious groups. In these cases, it is open to debate, you can choose to disagree, and you're not going to be kicked out of political party. Secondly, let's look at like this idea of representation. They told us, look, we need them to join political parties because they need to be represented. No, two things. One, they can vote. The fact is, like, students are still allowed to vote once they turn 21 or 18 in the UK, and that is in itself representation. But you can also forward student-related issues via those interest groups. Bear in mind that when the government in the UK chose to raise tuition fees in 2011, it wasn't student political parties that fought against this raise. It was a unified framework of individuals from a wide range of backgrounds who chose to believe that, look, this issue is apolitical. It is about myself and the fact that I'm affected by those issues. That can exist in government's world. We don't see why that's a problem. Lastly, soft skills, well, that can happen anyway. You're debating, you learn stuff, companies will hire you if you have that on your CV. Make sure to do that. Yeah. But what we do argue to you at the end of the day is that there was a very interesting fact that DLO talked about in his reply speech. He said there isn't actually a gun pointed to you for you to join political parties. Well, sure, that is true. But when you join a political party, there isn't a gun, there are two guns. Those guns are one, the threat of expulsion, and two, the threat of losing an election. We're very proud to propose.
Yeah. I'd just like to thank the speakers for being here and being, debating for the motion with all the passion and the spirits. We will now move on to the deliberation session. I already have this in mind. Let's just ask the crowd first. So who here thinks the government won? Please raise your hands. All right, can I ask the inverse of that? Who here thinks the opposition won? So what I'm getting so far is quite a split room, which is interesting. Before I move on to my deliberation, are there any questions? Okay, cool. Right, so I'm going to tell you what I thought the debate was about, and what were the issues in those debates, in this debate, and which sides won the issues and ultimately won the debate. So I thought this debate was quite clearly about whether or not the world is better off when students are not able to join politics and not able to join political parties specifically. So there were three issues. The first one was, does this harm the whole student experience? Does this harm your ability to enjoy your student years? And secondly, does this harm or benefit the political process that we have right now? And thirdly, whether or not this was good, whether or not it is viable to have such a thing, right? So let's start with the first issue. Government told us why it's bad for students to be involved in the political process, simply because you hurt the whole experience of university. You're not neutral. You're not more receptive towards other views when you align yourself to a political party, right? What did opposition say in response? Opposition said, well, that's not true, right? Students have their own mind, they're more mature, they can make their own decisions, they can choose what they want to fight for. Looking at this issue was thrown back and forth, right? They said it's dogmatic in nature. There's no room for neutrality. And opposition said, well, you can choose to leave this political party and not be part of it at all, which I thought was fair, right? So on a comparison, based on the breadth of analysis provided by those two teams, I thought this issue was 50-50. I couldn't find a clear winner here, because essentially what they were trying to say is because the moment you take up a political line, the moment you join a political party, you cannot compromise your ideas. And then they said, well, that's not true, we jump ship all the time. And then they replied by saying, well, it's very, very hard for you to do that because you lose elections, you lose votes, right? You lose your supporter base. So this issue to me was 50-50. So what made me decide this bit was this whole idea of whether or not our political process is better, with students or without students. Our position told you it's better to get students involved now because at the end of the day, they're going to be the ones who are leading the country. They're going to be the ones who are going to effectively implement policy. That's one. Second thing they told you was that because politics affects everyone, right? Politics affects everyone. That means you should also have the ability to impact change within special political groups. Then they said, well, you still have the ability to impact change via voting. But then they said, well, that's not necessarily true. Yes, you can still vote. But more effective change comes when you have a seat at the table. It means when you join these political parties. So to this issue, I thought opposition won. It was a very close debate. I thought opposition won for this issue. The last thing I wanted to talk about was whether or not there is a real compromise. Whether or not your declaration of allegiance to political parties is necessarily forever, and whether or not if students join now, they can't back out. On a comparative, I thought necessarily that's not really true. Politicians change stances all the time, and you can a better way for you to have discourse, a better way for you to discuss and move forward as a country is when you have students joining political parties, or you have students getting a seat at the table and talking about implementing effective change. So overall, I thought the opposition won. It was a very good debate. I enjoyed it. I thought it was a really close one. But yeah, that's my opinion. Any questions on debate techniques or what you thought of the debate? Or if anyone just has a question to any of the speakers, you can take the floor now. I would like to open the floor to anyone really. All right. I guess we are concluded for the day. Yeah. I'd like to invite the speakers to cross the floor, shake hands, and mingle. I guess. Thank you.